The small scout ship fell through the dark sky, its hull groaning beneath the weight of flames. On the barren world of Opharna, red dust swirled around twisted metal and shattered glass. The vessel's engines had failed moments ago, and now it lay broken among ancient stone pillars that rose like silent sentinels against the starless night. Inside the wreck, a tiny shape stirred. A little girl, her skin pale blue, her eyes half closed, lay curled beneath a panel of twisted metal. She was alone. Around her, the ship's lights flickered and died. The girl's breath came in soft, uneven gasps as she fought to wake. When she opened her eyes, all she saw were shadows. The air tasted of burnt circuits and alien dust. She blinked twice, then sat up, head spinning. She pressed one hand against the cold floor. A soft hiss escaped her lips as pain shot through her arm, but she did not cry out. Tentatively, she stood. Her jacket was torn, and her small boots were scuffed. She scanned the wreckage, a half-melted control panel, broken wires and seats torn from their mounts. No other living thing moved here. The only sound was the wind, carrying distant roars that set her heart racing. Carefully, she climbed over a heap of scrap and pushed herself out into the open air. The ruins stretched in all directions, stone walls carved with patterns she did not understand, arches collapsed into rubble, and corridors swallowed by sand. Faint gusts of wind whispered through broken doorways. A low growl echoed behind her. She froze, chest tightening. In the gloom beyond the stone pillars, two glowing eyes watched her. The creature held perfectly still, its form hidden by shadow. She could feel its gaze, hungry and patient. Her small body trembled. She glanced around for shelter. A narrow gap between two pillars offered a hiding place. Without thinking, she darted forward and squeezed into the tight crack, her back pressed against cold rock. She pressed her hands to her mouth to stop the sound of her own breathing. Above her, the creature advanced, claws clicking on stone. She dared not move. She shut her eyes, remembering her home, a warm room filled with soft lights and gentle songs. But that was gone now, lost with the ship. All she had left was this cold planet and her fear. Minutes passed like hours. She forced herself to calm her breath, counting each inhale and exhale. The bone-deep cold of the stone seeped through her clothes. She wished for her mother's voice, for the touch of her father's hand. Instead, she clung to a small pendant around her neck, a smooth oval stone that glowed faintly with pale light. She curled her fingers around it and closed her eyes. Another roar split the air. The creature had moved on, but now she heard many more. The crack of twigs, the low snarl of packs gathering at a distance. Her heart pounded again. She was a small child on a world of monsters. Hunger and thirst pressed against her belly. She dared not leave her hiding spot. Yet she could not stay forever. Carefully, she inched her way out of the gap and into the open. The night sky stretched overhead, stars blurred by dust. She scanned the ground until she found a shallow puddle of rainwater collected in a piece of broken hull. She knelt and cupped her hands. The water was cool on her lips. She drank deeply, her throat burning with relief. For a moment, hope glimmered inside her. She could survive. She must survive. But as she drank, the wind carried a new sound, distant but urgent, like the beating of metal wings. She stood and looked up. Far above the ruins, a pinprick of light blinked in the sky. It pulsed in steady rhythm, too regular to be a creature's eyes. She stared at that distant glow, her heart fluttering. Could it be someone searching for her? She let herself imagine a ship descending, rescuing her from these monsters. For the first time since the crash, her tears fell. Tears of both relief and fear. A sudden clang echoed close by. She whirled, stumbling back toward her hiding place. The creatures were near. She had no time to think. She dashed into a narrow archway and pressed herself against its wall, breathing so softly that she barely knew she was alive. The monsters roamed just beyond the edge of the light cast by her small, glowing pendant. Their shapes shifted in and out of sight. She could see rough scales and lashing tails, but never the whole form. They sniffed the air, testing for her scent. She squeezed her eyes shut and whispered into the darkness, Please, someone find me. She had no idea if anyone ever would. All she could do was wait. The night pressed in around her, a blanket of sound and cold. Above, the faint beacon still blinked, like a single pulse of hope in a sea of fear. And in the tangled shadows of the ruins, the little alien girl waited, telling herself that as long as the light pulsed, she had to stay alive. Leary pressed her back against the cold stone, listening to the soft scrape of claws on hard ground. The monsters had paused at the edge of her light, their low growls fading into the wind. She dared not move. Her small heart pounded so loudly she feared it might give her away. She focused on her breathing, slow, steady, in and out, until the sounds of the creatures drifted far enough away that she felt safe to breathe freely once more. Careful not to make a sound, Leary slid along the wall of the archway, putting space between herself and the dark forms that hunted her. The ruins here formed a labyrinth of broken corridors and fallen arches. Every step she took stirred clouds of red dust, and each little stone under her boot seemed to echo like a drum. She hugged the wall and moved in short bursts, stopping whenever she heard whispering wind or distant roars. She found a narrow tunnel where the roof had collapsed, filling the passage with rubble and loose stones. Crouching low, Leary wriggled through a gap just wide enough for her small frame. The air changed here. It was cooler and smelled faintly of damp moss, a surprising scent on this dry, harsh world. She paused to let her eyes adjust, then noticed a shallow pool of water half hidden beneath a fallen beam. A trickle of dripping water made a steady rhythm on the stones. Leary knelt beside the pool and touched the water with one finger. It rippled quietly in the dim light. She cupped her hands again and took a small sip. Even though she had drunk before, the water here tasted different, earthy and fresh. It reminded her of rain on her home world, and for a moment the ache in her chest eased. She filled her small metal flask as best she could, knowing she would need it later. Rising slowly, she scanned the tunnel walls. Strange markings carved long ago formed spirals and lines that shimmered faintly in her pendant's glow. She pressed her palm against the carvings, feeling the smooth, worn stone under her fingers. The symbols were unfamiliar, but they spoke of a time when this place had life and purpose. Leary felt a curious mix of awe and sadness. A world so full of beauty must once have been safe, now it lay in ruin. A sudden crack startled her. Small stones tumbled from above as the tunnel shook. Leary stumbled back, heart racing. Dust fell from the ceiling in showers. She pressed herself flat against the wall and covered her head. The sound of shifting rock lasted only a few seconds, but to her it felt like an age. When the dust settled, she lifted her hands and peered up. The tunnel overhead had cracked but still held. She exhaled in relief, then forced her legs to move again. At the end of the tunnel, she found steps carved into the rock. Each step was worn smooth, as if thousands of feet had passed this way. Leary paused at the bottom and listened. A distant echo carried down the stairs, a soft metallic hum, like the pulse of a dying engine. She could not tell if it was friend or foe, but it gave her hope. Hope that she was not entirely alone on Opharna. Slowly, she climbed. Each footfall on the stone stair whispered through the corridor above. When she emerged, she stood in a wide chamber lit by holes in the ceiling that let in pale moonlight. In the center lay a large oval platform covered in dust. Strange devices slumped against its sides, panels with empty screens, wires hanging loose. The hum was stronger here, a steady beat that matched the glow of her pendant. Cautiously, Leary approached the platform. She reached out and touched a smooth edge. The metal was cool but not scorched like her ship. She ran her fingers along its curve until she found a small button recessed in the surface. Her heart fluttered. She pressed it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a soft click. The platform's rim lit up in a gentle blue glow, and the hum deepened. Leary's eyes widened. Small lights blinked along the platform's edge, forming a circle of soft luminescence. On the wall opposite her, a panel flickered to life, displaying symbols and shapes she could not read. She took a step back, awed. This place had power. Someone had built it to command machines or speak across great distances. Perhaps it could send a signal, Reach a helper. Her small mind raced. If she could learn to use this device, maybe she could call for rescue, but the symbols on the wall meant nothing to her. She knelt to study them, tracing one shape with her fingertip. It looked like her pendant's glow captured in stone. She tapped another symbol. Nothing changed. She felt frustration rise, but she forced herself to stay calm. Leary stood and circled the platform looking for other controls. She saw a curved lever low on one side. Biting her lip in determination, she reached down and pulled it. The hum quickened, and the lights around the platform brightened. A low tone sounded, soft and musical. Her chest tightened with excitement. She might have done something right. Suddenly, the heavy stones at the chamber's entrance shifted. Leary whirled around, eyes wide. The monsters had found her again. Two pairs of glowing eyes stared at her through the darkness. Their shapes were rough and hulking, but she sensed they could tear her apart in an instant. She backed toward the platform, not stopping to think. The creatures lunged forward. Leary's mouth went dry as the hum inside the platform grew louder. In a last flicker of courage, she mashed the lever with both hands. The hum became a roar of power. A burst of blue light flooded the chamber. The creatures recoiled with a howl, fleeing back into the shadows. Leary stood trembling on the glowing platform, tears of fear and relief running down her cheeks. Her heart pounded so hard she felt it in her throat. The chamber was silent except for the fading echo of the device's power. She sank to her knees, pressing her forehead to the cool metal. In the dark, the hum died away, and the platform returned to its soft pulse. Leary wiped her eyes and looked around. She had fought off monsters with an alien device she did not understand. Somehow she had survived again. She was alone, but no longer helpless. The ruins of Opharna held secrets and strength, and Leary was determined to learn them all. Leary rose from the glowing platform, her knees stiff and her breath coming in sharp bursts. The chamber was calm now, lit only by the faint blue pulse of the device beneath her feet, and the silver sliver of moonlight through the upper vents. She pressed one hand to her racing heart and peered into the shadows, half expecting the monsters to return. When only silence answered, she let herself exhale. She stood slowly, brushing dust from her clothes. The platform's hum was gone, but its soft glow remained as a promise of power in this forsaken place. Leary stepped down and found the entrance blocked by a fallen stone pillar. The rubble was too heavy for her to move, but a narrow gap at its edge offered a path onward. She crouched and squeezed through, careful not to disturb loose stones. Beyond, the pillar lay a long corridor, its walls lined with more of the strange carvings. Here and there, broken consoles leaned against the stone, their screens dark. Leary's pendant shone faintly against her chest, a counterpoint to the platform's light fading behind her. She ran her fingers along the console nearest to her. The surface was cool and smooth, broken only by a few buttons etched with unfamiliar icons. She pressed one, hoping for a flicker of life, but nothing happened. Further down the hall, the corridor opened into a wider hall filled with curved benches and low tables once designed for gatherings. Dust lay thick on every surface, and piles of rubble sat where statues or plants may have stood. Leary paused by one of the benches and touched its edge. She could almost imagine people seated here, speaking in quiet tones, sharing knowledge or stories. The thought warmed her, reminding her that life once thrived in these ruins. A soft echo reached her ears, footsteps. She froze and looked toward the far doorway, where pale light edged in from another chamber. Someone, or something, was coming. Leary pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding. The footsteps grew closer, slow and deliberate. She held her breath. At the doorway, a tall figure appeared, silhouetted against the brighter room beyond. It moved with measured grace, and Leary realized it wore a long cloak that pooled on the floor behind it. The figure paused, as if sensing her presence, then stepped forward into the hall. Leary's heart thudded in her chest like a drum. She thought perhaps the monsters had grown curious, but this visitor carried no weapon and moved without menace. The cloak's hood hid the face, but a soft glow from within the hood caught Leary's eye, just like the light of her pendant. The stranger raised a hand and pointed toward the device room. A gentle hum rippled through the air. Leary peered around the corner of the bench. The stranger moved toward the platform's chamber, touching one of the carved symbols on the wall. The device there sprang to life again, its lights dancing. The stranger reached out and pressed several buttons on a portable console they carried. A soft chorus of tones filled the hall, and images flickered onto the walls, symbols and shapes. Maps of star systems Leary could not name. A shiver ran through Leary. This stranger knew the ruins. Perhaps they built them. Perhaps they understood the devices better than she ever could. But would they help her, or leave her behind to face the monsters once more? She stayed hidden as the stranger studied the holographic map, touching points in space with care. Then the figure turned as if guided by an unseen compass and moved deeper into the ruins. Leary's curiosity overcame her fear. She followed, keeping to the shadows and moving as silently as a ghost. After a few bends in the corridor, they reached a sealed door etched with a pattern of concentric circles. The stranger pressed their hand against the largest circle. The door shuddered, then slid aside with a low rumble. Leary's eyes widened. She had never seen doors move like this. The inner chamber beyond was dark, but faint lights glowed along its walls. The figure stepped through and vanished into the gloom. Leary hesitated for only a moment, then crept forward. Her small hand touched the sliding door's edge, cold as ice. She slipped inside. The chamber's ceiling arched high above, supported by columns carved with alien creatures. At the far end sat a circular table surrounded by 7 chairs held in place by metal struts. Each chair bore the same glowing symbol as the device outside. Leary's heart pounded with awe. This room must have been a council chamber, a place of importance. She moved toward the table. In the center lay a crystal sphere, dull now but still beautiful. Leary reached for it, her fingers trembling. The instant her skin touched its surface, the sphere flared to life in brilliant white light that filled the room. She gasped and pulled back, knocking against a chair that slid and clattered to the floor. The stranger emerged from the shadows, at the table's edge. "Do not fear," a calm voice said. Leary snapped her head toward them. The hood had fallen back, revealing a tall being with pale green skin and silver hair that shimmered like starlight. Their eyes were kind, yet serious. "They call me Severin," the being said. "I have waited centuries for one who carries the Lightstone." They pointed at Leary's pendant. "Yours is the only spark left of our world's true power." Leary's breath caught. The pendant. She pressed her hand over it, feeling its soft warmth. How do you know of the Lightstone?" She whispered. Severin stepped closer. "Your people named it for the hope it brings. Without it, our home fell to darkness. But you, child of 2 worlds, hold the last beacon. Together, we may reach those who can rescue you." Their voice echoed with both hope and sorrow. Leary's eyes brimmed with tears, not of fear but of wonder. After all the terror and loneliness, someone knew her name, knew her purpose. She breathed in and straightened her small shoulders. "I want to go home," she said softly. "Will you help me?" Severin's silver hair caught the light as they inclined their head. "Yes," they replied. "But first, we must awaken the star map. Then we can send our plea across the stars." They held out a slender hand. "Come, Leary. Your journey is only beginning." Leary took Severin's hand, her heart filled with the first true hope she had felt since the crash. Behind her, the doorway to the darkness shut quietly, and before her the path to the stars opened at last. Moonlight filtered through the broken ceiling as Leary and Severin worked together at the glowing console. Severin guided Leary's small fingers over the smooth controls while the crystal sphere at the center of the table cast soft white light around the chamber. Leary felt a thrill of excitement and fear. She followed Severin's calm voice as they activated each symbol in turn. Outside, the wind carried soft echoes through the ruins. Severin's hooded cloak brushed against the stone floor as they moved from one console to the next. "We are almost ready," Severin said, their silver eyes reflecting the sphere's light. "When the map opens, We send our signal through the stars. Leary nodded, chest tight with hope. Severin placed a hand on Leary's shoulder. Press the final sigil, child, they instructed. Leary took a deep breath. She reached out and pressed the last glowing symbol. Immediately the room hummed, and a panel slid open in the wall. Behind it lay a hollow map of distant star systems, their lines and dots pulsing like living things. Together, they watched as Severin tapped patterns on the hollow map. A bright beam of light shot upward through the ceiling vents and into the night sky. Leary's heart fluttered. She imagined the beam traveling light years across silent space, carrying her plea for rescue. Far above Opharna, on the salvage ship Artemis, Captain Mara Wells stood at the bridge window. She squinted through the thick dust that surrounded the planet. The Artemis had followed a faint beacon for days. At first, the crew had feared a trap. Then the signal had grown stronger, pulsing with a rhythm too regular for any animal. Signal is stabilizing, Lieutenant Cho reported. It's coming from down there, in the ruins. Mara's jaw tightened. She had orders to avoid unnecessary risks, but she could not ignore a possible survivor. Prepare a landing party, she commanded. Suit up for contact and possible wildlife. Below, Leary and Severin watched the holomap. Severin whisper, at an alien phrase, and the map's light dimmed. They are coming, Severin said. Outside, a distant thrum grew louder. Leary's breath caught as she heard a metallic roar. A bright shape descended through the ceiling vent, settling on the dusty floor above the chamber. The drumbeat of machinery shook the stones. Then a panel in the far wall slid open and a beam of white light cut through the darkness. Leary held Severin's hand, her eyes wide. 3 figures stepped through the light, humans in sleek suits, their helmets reflecting the chamber in small ovals. One carried a scanner that glowed green. The leader's voice crackled through a speaker. This is Captain Wells of the Artemis. We come in peace. Is anyone here in need of help? Severin stepped forward, cloak sweeping the floor. Leary stood at their side, clutching her pendant. She watched as Mara lowered her visor, revealing calm brown eyes lined with concern. The captain knelt to bring her face closer to Leary's. Hello, Mara said gently. I'm Captain Wells. I found your signal. Leary's throat tightened. She felt a mix of relief and shyness. She could not speak the human words yet, but she pointed to herself and whispered, Leary. Mara smiled and repeated, Leary. Severin spoke next, in a voice that echoed softly. Though the humans could not fully understand the alien tongue, the scanner began translating. We rescue the child, the device rendered. Mara's eyes shone. We will help you, she promised. Lieutenant Cho moved forward, scanning the chamber and then the crystal sphere on the table. This device, it's unlike anything we've seen, Cho murmured. Severin bowed politely. It guides us, they replied. It brought hope back to my world. Mara stood and glanced at Leary. Come with us, she said softly, gesturing toward the ship's beam. Leary hesitated, looking back at Severin. Severin nodded and smiled. Go, they encouraged. You are safe now. Leary took a step forward and then another. As she crossed the threshold of light, Mara held out her hand. Leary reached for it and felt the warmth of human skin. The beam lifted them upward, carrying both hope and new beginnings. Below, the ruins fell silent once more, the hollow map dark. But in the sky above Opharna, the Artemis rose with its precious passenger. On its bridge, Leary gazed out at the planet disappearing beneath the clouds. She pressed her forehead to the glass and felt her tears of fear transform into tears of joy. Captain Wells placed a gentle hand on Leary's shoulder. You're safe, she said. Leary nodded, closing her eyes as the stars stretched into lines. She whispered, Thank you, and felt the promise of home growing closer with every pulse of the engines. Leary's world rocked gently as the Artemis slipped free from Opharna's gravity. Inside the ship's medbay, soft lights glowed over a row of reclining chairs. Leary sat in one, her small frame swaddled in a thick blanket. Captain Mara Wells knelt beside her, holding a clear cup of water. Leary's throat still felt raw from dust and fear. When Mara lifted the cup, Leary bowed her head and sipped. The water was cool and sweet. She blinked in surprise, then looked up at Mara with wide eyes. Mara smiled and said, "Water." She pointed at the cup and repeated, "Water." Leary repeated the word, her small voice soft. "Water." Mara's eyes lit up. She pointed to Leary and said, "Friend." Then, she pointed to herself and said, "Friend." Leary frowned at first. She did not know the sound, but she watched Mara's mouth carefully. She pointed to herself and said, "Friend." Then she pointed to Mara. "Friend." Both women laughed softly. Nearby, Lieutenant Cho hovered with a data pad. He peered over his glasses at the diagnostics. "We're stable," he said. "Engines at 2/3 power. No signs of hull damage beyond entry point." Leary shivered at the hum of the engines. Mara noticed and wrapped the blanket tighter, around Leary's shoulders. "Safe," Mara said, pointing to Leary's chest, then to her own heart. She tapped Leary's chest and gently tapped her own. "Safe," she said again. Leary nodded and touched Mara's hand. A soft alarm echoed through the bay. Cho tapped his data pad. "Small breach in cargo hold 5, he announced. "Pressure drop. Automatic seal failed." The ship's hum grew to a low roar. Leary's eyes widened with fear. She clutched Mara's hand. Mara rose quickly and stood. "Stay here," she ordered calmly. She pressed a button on the wall and the bay door slid open with a whoosh. A corridor's cold blue light spilled in. Mara turned to Leary. "I'll be back soon," she said, kneeling. She traced a line from her heart to Leary's heart. "Safe," she whispered. Then she stood and strode from the bay. Leary watched the door close, her blanket slipping from her lap. She stared at the small pendant around her neck, its pale light steady. She took a deep breath and clutched the pendant as if it could keep her safe. Moments later, the medbay doors hissed open. Mara carried a small crate of supplies. Behind her, Cho and 2 engineers rolled a portable repair unit. Mara set the crate on the floor. "Might be noisy," she warned Leary. The engineers wheeled the repair unit past the chairs. The machine hummed and whirred as it sealed the breach. Sparks flew from its arm, and the engineers wore protective visors. Leary covered her ears, her eyes squeezed shut. Mara gently pulled Leary's face toward her. "Together," she said, placing her arms around Leary. "Together." Leary opened her eyes and nodded. Mara led her to the far end of the bay, away from the machine's lights. In that quieter corner, Mara took 2 small cloth dolls from the crate. One looked human, the other shaped like a simple alien child. She placed them on Leary's lap. "Dolls," Mara said, pointing. Leary touched the dolls, turning them over in her hands. Mara pointed to the human doll. "Human," she said, then to the alien doll. "Alien." Leary's eyes shone as she repeated both words, careful to shape her lips just like Mara's. As the repair unit finished, the door closed again. The hum died down, leaving only the gentle ship's heartbeat. Leary looked up at Mara, her voice soft and proud. "Human, alien." Mara smiled. "Yes," she said. "Friends." She gathered Leary into her arms in a brief hug. Leary hugged back. The two stayed like that until Cho returned, his datapad tucked under one arm. "All clear," Cho announced. "Pressure stable, cargo hold door sealed." He glanced at Leary. "You're doing great." Leary offered him a shy nod. "Friend," she said, pointing first to herself and then to Cho. Cho laughed and said, "Friend." That evening, the crew gathered in the small mess hall. The room was bright and warm with a long table and simple seating. Mara carried Leary in her arms and the girl tracked every movement with eager eyes. The crew cleared a place for them at the head of the table. Mara set Leary down gently in a booster seat. She placed a small bowl of soft fruits in front of her. Leary reached for a piece of orange-pink melon and tasted it. Her eyes widened with delight. Mara pointed to the fruit and said, "Food." Leary nodded. "Food," she echoed, then popped the melon into her mouth. As other crew members joined, Mara raised her cup. "To new friends," she said, smiling, at Leary. The crew lifted their cups and echoed, "To new friends." Leary watched each face around the table, humans of different ages, some smiling, some curious. She felt warmth spread in her chest. After the meal, Mara carried Leary back to the med bay. Leary yawned, her energy spent from excitement and learning. Mara tucked her into a reclining chair, wrapping the blanket snugly around her again. "Home," Mara whispered, tracing an arc from her own heart to Leary's. "Home." Leary closed her eyes and whispered, "Home." She drifted into sleep, the soft hum of the Artemis like a lullaby. Mara sat beside her, watching the gentle rise and fall of Leary's chest. The stars outside the viewport stretched into lines as the ship sailed through space. In that quiet moment, rescuer and rescued shared a bond stronger than fear, a bond of trust, kindness, and hope that would see them safely home. The Artemis sailed through silent space, its engines a steady hum beneath gleaming metal. In the small quarters assigned to Captain Mara Wells, Leary sat on a low mat, tracing symbols in a hollow notebook. The lights were dimmed to a soft glow, and the air smelled faintly of coolant and polished steel. Mara watched from the doorway, arms crossed, a gentle smile on her face. Leary's brow furrowed as she copied the shapes of human letters. Odd curves and straight lines that made no sound, yet held whole words. Tonight, they had agreed, Leary would learn to read and write basic English so she could tell her story in her own hand. "Easy," Mara said, stepping forward. She tapped the letter A on the page, then tapped Leary's finger. "A," Leary repeated softly. "A." Mara pointed to the next symbol. "B." Leary paused, then said, "B." A soft chime sounded from the translation device resting on the table. Both turned to see the device display. "Good job." Pride brightened Leary's face. She giggled, the sound like silver bells in the quiet room. Mara reached out and ruffled Leary's hair. "Very good," she praised. Then she tapped another word, "friendship." Leary's eyes widened at the long string of letters. She tried, stumbling over each shape. When she finished, the device rendered, "Friendship is strong." Leary beamed. She pointed to Mara and whispered, "Friendship." Mara returned the gesture, placing her hand over her heart. "Friendship," she repeated, and Leary's small hand settled in Mara's. Later, Leary wandered the ship's corridor, under Mara's watchful eye. The walls were lined with data screens, each flickering with maps, engine readouts, and star charts. Leary's finger hovered over one display showing Opharna's system. The planet she had nearly died on was now a pale red dot among many. "Home," Leary murmured, tracing a circle around it. She tapped another dot where the Artemis was headed. Leary looked at Mara, voice trembling with hope. "Earth?" Mara nodded. "Earth," she confirmed, placing Leary's hand on the screen. Leary's eyes shone with wonder. They entered the bridge together. Crew members paused and smiled as Leary passed. Lieutenant Cho waved from his console. Leary waved back, practicing her English greeting. "Hello." Cheered by Cho's thumbs up, she spun in a circle, her small boots clicking on the metal deck. Mara guided Leary to the navigator's station, where a gentle officer named Imani awaited. "Time to learn Gal lingo," Imani teased, holding out a headset with small speakers and a microphone. Leary's eyes darted between the device and Imani's patient smile. Imani placed the headset on Leary's head. "You'll hear English spoken," she explained, adjusting the volume. "Repeat after me." A clear voice spoke in Leary's ear. "My name is Leary." The alien girl's lips moved as she echoed, "My name is Leary." Imani tapped the translation device, and on its screen appeared, Hello, I am Leary. Encouraged, Leary said louder. Hello, I am Leary. Imani clapped softly. Excellent, she said. Then she guided Leary through other phrases. Thank you. Please. Help. Each time, Leary carefully repeated, pressing her hands together for thank you, touching her chest for please and holding out her palm for help. The device translated each phrase, reinforcing Leary's progress. Meanwhile, in the cargo bay, Severin quietly studied the recovered alien technology. The holomap sphere glowed softly on a workbench beside them. They had not spoken much with the humans yet, respecting Leary's need to adjust. But each day, Severin observed the Artemis's routines, learning to trust these strange rescuers. That afternoon, Leary discovered Severin alone near the sphere. The alien elder was tracing constellations on the holomap, their long fingers leaving trails of sparkling light. Leary approached, her pendant echoing the sphere's glow. Severin, she whispered, pointing at the elder. Severin looked up, relief flooding their pale green eyes. Leary, Severin replied, the translation device echoing their words. You learn well. They gestured to the sphere, and then to Leary's pendant. Both lights pulsed in unison. Leary's chest swelled with pride. Severin guided Leary's hand to the sphere. This map shows where help may come, they explained slowly. The humans call it home. They pointed to the Earth dot on the map. Earth. Leary tapped the dot. Earth. Severin then pointed to Opharna's location. Opharna. Leary tapped that dot too, calling out both names in turn. Together, they activated the map's signal again, sending a weak pulse toward a hidden relay station in human space. Severin smiled sadly. They will come, they said. But time moves, slowly. Leary laid her hand on Severin's arm. Soon, she promised. As evening fell, Leary returned to her quarters, laden with new words echoing in her mind. She had filled pages of her hollow notebook with English letters and phrases. She felt both tired and triumphant. Slipping under her blanket, she pressed her pendant to her lips and whispered, Thank you. In her tiny voice, the words held, the weight of two worlds coming together. On the bridge, Mara watched the stars drift by. She kept the hollow notebook close, marking Leary's progress. This little alien girl had shown courage beyond her years. Mara placed a protective hand on the notebook. She knew the bond they forged now, through language, trust, and shared hope, would guide them safely home. And as long as Leary learned, as long as humans listened, the bond would grow stronger, bridging worlds between starlight and darkness. The Artemis drifted through the pale blue glow of Earth's upper atmosphere. Below, oceans and continents merged in endless swirls of green and brown. Leary pressed her forehead against the viewport, her pale blue skin bathed in soft light. She had never seen a world so full of life. All around her, the human crew bustled, with quiet excitement. Captain Mara Wells stood behind Leary, her hand resting gently on the girl's small shoulder. Together they watched the planet grow larger until the ship began its final descent. When the landing gear touched down on a flat, grassy plain, the ramp lowered with a soft hiss. Leary's boots made their first prints on Earth soil. She paused, staring at the grass blades swaying in a gentle breeze. The air smelled of flowers and rain. A group of scientists and aid workers waited beyond the ramp, their faces warm with welcome. They held out instruments, cameras, and soft blankets. Leary hesitated only a moment, then stepped forward into the bright sunlight. A tall woman in a white coat knelt before Leary. She offered a soft sponge to clean the dust from Leary's face. The girl let the woman gently wipe her cheeks, welcoming the cool touch. The scientist spoke in calm, slow English, checking Leary's health and offering her water and simple foods. Leary tasted a piece of fresh fruit, sweet and juicy, and gave a happy nod. She pointed to the woman and said carefully, "Thank you." The word came easily now, full of meaning. Nearby, Severin watched with quiet joy. The alien elder's silver hair glowed in the sun as they stood among the humans. Severin bowed politely to the science team and then laid a hand on Leary's head, in a gentle blessing. Though the humans could not fully understand Severin's words, the translation device whispered, "May hope guide your steps." Leary reached up and gripped Severin's robe. The two shared a look of shared purpose. Their friendship had bridged worlds. A soft cheer rose as Captain Wells stepped forward and addressed the gathering through a portable speaker. "Today we welcome a brave survivor and her guide from another world," she announced. "Their journey shows that kindness and courage can unite us all." Leary held Mara's hand and looked at the assembled crowd. In that moment, humans and aliens stood side by side, sharing hope under Earth's sky. After the formal greeting, a small Earth child approached Leary. She held out a bright red flower. With a shy smile, Leary took it and tucked it behind her ear. The child giggled and whispered, "Friend." Leary grinned and echoed, "Friend." The two walked together across the field, comparing differences in fur and feathers, and even laughed when they discovered they both loved fresh fruit. In simple moments like these, Leary felt joy bloom inside her. That evening, as the sun sank behind distant hills, Leary stood with Mara and Severin on a gentle hill overlooking the landing site. The Artemis's engines cooled to a quiet rest. Severin laid a hand on the holomap sphere, now housed safely in the ship's cargo hold. "Our people will see this," Severin said softly, voice full of hope. "They will know Earth values life and friendship." Leary touched Severin's hand. "They will come," she promised, thinking of the survivors still lost on Opharna. Captain Wells joined them, holding a small data tablet. "The signal is set to broadcast to every listening station in human space," she explained. "Soon, forces will mobilize to reclaim Opharna, peacefully and with respect." The three watched as the tablet displayed a moving line of light shooting out to distant stars. Each pulse carried Leary's story, Severin's wisdom, and humanity's promise of protection. Under the rising moon, Leary looked to the stars one last time before turning her gaze to Earth's rolling fields. She thought of the monsters she had fled and the monsters she had conquered with courage and hope. She felt the warmth of the grass under her boots and the friendship of two very different worlds standing beside her. In her heart, she carried the Lightstone's glow, a spark of life that would never fade. As the camp quieted, Leary lay on a soft blanket, her pendant glowing faintly at her chest. Beside her, Mara whispered, "Sleep now, little one. Tomorrow we begin the work of healing both our worlds." Leary closed her eyes, a gentle smile on her lips, and drifted into dreams of new adventures. Above her, stars winked in silent promise. A new dawn had come, and with it the bond of humanity and alien hope would light the way forward.